Hi all, a new day and new stories from Ocean Story. Just listen to this story. My childhood was spent with a large and diverse family. We considered each other not just relatives, but real brothers and sisters. Even my stepmother in my eyes is a real mom. We children shared a warm and close bond, except in one case. It concerns my half-sister Lena, name changed. My parents assumed her sense of alienation was due to a difference in upbringing, because she didn't grow up with us. But it was more than that. By the time she moved in with us, Lena was almost 18. Despite her age, that wasn't the reason for her estrangement. Leanna had been homeschooled and was considered very intelligent, but the tests showed that her level of knowledge was only 9th grade, with no way to move her up to a higher level at our school. This was an obstacle because she was only a month away from adulthood, which meant that schooling could take up to 21 years, with a high probability of dropping out. The only alternative was to get her GED certificate, which would be a disappointment. After all, Lena had a unique opportunity from family friends, an offer of support for higher education, provided she enrolled in a special college program. This offer could have been withdrawn if Lena had chosen to go the GED route, which reduced her chances of admission and subsequent education. Our family drama escalated as parents began to look for a way out of Lena's predicament. Change came unexpectedly from a private school administrator, an acquaintance of the family, who offered a solution. He agreed to accept Lena on the condition that the family make a donation to the school. The cost of this decision was $100,000, allowing Lena to complete an accredited high school education and attend college. This financial move had serious implications for the entire family. Being middle class, we could not afford such an expense without repercussions. In order to pay for Lena's tuition, most of us had to take on significant student loans. My younger siblings even had to transfer to public schools. The support previously given to my older brother was exhausted, leaving the rest of us without financial assistance. My parents justified their decision by the need to give all their children an equal start in life. It seemed to them that this was the only way for Lena. However, when my mother questioned our estrangement from Lena, it became clear that the reason was resentment toward her for the financial sacrifices the whole family had to make. 10 years later, the lack of any attempt on Lena's part to apologize or somehow make up for the situation only intensified the resentment. Mom was worried about the conflict, seeing that no one but her accepted Lena. Dad believed that this attitude drove Mom to depression as she felt the family bond breaking. Despite our best efforts, we remained a family to everyone but Lena. I admit that my decision to remind my parents of how my half-sister affected the future of our family was rash. I was consumed with emotion when I spoke out about Leanna's influence. The question of the nature of her actions that caused such a reaction surfaced. Criticizing you for refusing to give her an opportunity caused a misunderstanding. You realized that Leanna was not just a figure in your life. She was a child facing hardship. There is a sense that you took her circumstances as a personal fault, despite the fact that it was her parents who made the decision to invest in her education through their connections with a private school. It's time to take an adult stance and treat the situation with maturity. While waiting for the moment when Lena would do something disgusting, you never found a valid reason to be offended. Instead, it became clear that the mistake was not giving her the opportunity for a traditional education. Her parents were faced with having to make a significant investment to remedy the situation, which impacted the entire family. Admittedly, the notion of disastrous consequences for your future because of this situation may be exaggerated. Despite your educational path, you have also continued your college education. If the financial hardship was so great, your share of the expenses would hardly be grounds for deep resentment. Dividing the sum of $100,000 for 4 children does represent a weighty financial burden, but it does not fully cover the cost of tuition, leaving the need to borrow. Lena may not have been the instigator of these costs, but she recognizes that her siblings have suffered because of securing benefits for her. It is wrong to blame Lena for the decisions made by her parents, and it is also wrong to hold them solely at fault. Mutual understanding and acceptance of circumstances can be a step towards family harmony. My next story. I turned 30 last week, just 5 months after the birth of our daughter, whom I am breastfeeding. It was not possible to leave the house on my birthday as my husband was at work and the babysitter was not available. However, he suggested that I plan to meet up with my girlfriends the next day when he had the day off. This suggestion gave me hope for a little break, since I hadn't done anything like this in a year and a half. On Saturday morning, a friend of my husband's invited him out for a snowmobile ride. Husband asked for my permission, and I agreed, on the condition that he be home by 7 p.m. so I could leave to run my own errands. He promised to be back even earlier, around 4 in the afternoon. However, plans changed when I received a text from my husband that his friend was stuck on a snowmobile off-trail and they were trying to get him out. I reminded my husband of my plans and asked him to hurry, even though they were an hour away from the friend's house. Contrary to expectations, my husband didn't return until 10 p.m. and to my surprise, he was under the influence of alcohol. He claimed to have had only 4 drinks, but that didn't matter to me. I asked him to sleep on the couch and myself, overwhelmed with despair, fell asleep in tears. I found myself in a situation where it was absolutely impossible for me to leave the house, but it's worth noting that since I was pregnant, my husband had been making regular outings at least once a month. The morning after the incident, he tried to apologize and promised to make things right, but I was in no mood to listen to him and told him I didn't want to communicate right now. His actions hurt me throughout the day. Despite my pleas to leave me alone, he kept trying to talk to me and even hug me, which only made the situation worse. I ended up trying to avoid him and demanded silence. Now he accuses me of childish behavior and claims that the situation, which happened for the first time, deserves forgiveness. While I recognized that this was an isolated incident, the circumstances of its occurrence, at the exact moment when I finally had my own plans, seem more than a coincidence to me. It makes me think about my feelings and decisions for the future, including the possibility of having more personal time for myself. Your spouse should take over childcare responsibilities by giving up the babysitter. This is an important step for him to understand what fatherly care is all about. So take this opportunity to go to the spa on Saturday, enjoy seeing your girlfriends twice a month for dinner, go to the movies, and do things that bring you joy. Now is the time for your husband to prove himself as a father. When he asks about the possibility of spending time with friends on a day when you already have things planned, the answer should be no. His guilt-induced attempts at manipulation should be rejected. You need to realize that his indifference to how his actions affect your time and emotions cannot go unchecked. By denying him access to communication and intimacy, you are emphasizing that guilt or remorse should not be seen as a punishment or burden. When he seeks forgiveness by pretending that you wanted to discuss the problem on your own, that's no reason to feel pressured. It's unacceptable when he resents your outrage over his behavior, even if it's been less than 24 hours since the incident, pretending it's a small thing, like a piece of clothing forgotten at the dry cleaners. His actions that cause deep irritation and leave you in a state of cold indignation should not diminish your desire to celebrate your own holidays and enjoy life, especially when he promised that Saturday would be your time to celebrate. His ill-conceived actions are evidence of short-sightedness and lack of caring. A story that really surprised me. People often seek intimacy and connection by engaging in relationships with others. However, my 25-year-old sister, Rosie, who has always been a strong support for me, did not always seem to be able to find common ground with others. Rosie and I have supported each other since childhood, especially after our parents' divorce. Life with an addicted and abusive mother was not easy. Despite these difficulties, Rosie was my protector and guardian, taking care of me, cooking and raising me until I was 13, until we moved in with my father, where our lives improved markedly. 2 months ago, Rosie passed away, dying of ovarian cancer. We were mentally prepared for this loss, but her passing was a painful blow, especially after the funeral. At that point, I informed my girlfriend that I would be spending the week with my family as work was being planned at her house and I wanted to be close to my loved ones. Although my girlfriend wasn't initially thrilled with the idea, her mood improved over time. To honor Rosie, who loved roses and had that beautiful name herself, I decided to get a small tattoo of a rose on the top of my forearm, about 2 inches in size. My father also decided to make a similar gesture. When I shared this decision with my girlfriend, she flared up, stating that she thought such a tattoo was disrespectful to her because it represented another woman. I clarified to my girlfriend that it was my sister we were talking about, and my father also gets a similar tattoo. She objected, arguing that it is not the same. Her response turned into yelling, and I chose to walk away. She later sought support from her friend, who suggested that I should get a tattoo of my girlfriend's name if I decided to take such a step. This suggestion seemed absurd to me, considering we had only been dating for a year. My girlfriend expressed that perhaps I love my sister more than her. I tried to explain that they are different kinds of love, but she refused to listen. It's hard for me to understand why this situation bothers her so much. When my sister was alive, my girlfriend and her communicated well, even though I only saw my sister twice a month. My sister and I have always been close, and this should not have caused my girlfriend any offense, as we both prefer not to show our feelings openly. However, my girlfriend feels that having a tattoo of another woman is selfish and disrespectful to her. Her reaction about how I should let go of my sister after her death seems unacceptable to me. This is perplexing to me because previously my sister and my girlfriend had a good relationship. Now, according to my girlfriend, I should let go of my sister's memory, which is an absurd suggestion. The behavior of rational people is different from that exhibited by a certain person who possesses obvious insecurity. This is an example of something that defies logical explanation. I sincerely feel sorry for the sister's situation, and the friend's behavior is surprising. Her support in this context seems absurd. It's hard to believe that someone could decide to make such an iconic gesture as a tattoo based on such motives. If the friend does not see the difference between the desire to immortalize the memory of her sister and a frivolous venture, then her position and demands seem ill-founded. While worrying about my sister, I encountered misunderstanding on the part of my friend, who, instead of supporting me, expressed dissatisfaction with the time spent with her family and the decision to get a tattoo. This behavior does not meet the expectations of a supportive partner. In this situation, it is recommended that the relationship be reconsidered because it is not bringing the expected support and understanding. Concluding the story, one recalls the moment when the girlfriend, unexpectedly appearing in the evening, began to rebuke and make unfounded assumptions about the motives for creating the tattoo. This caused severe misunderstanding and conflict, after which the relationship was finally broken. At such a difficult moment, realizing that the relationship had become unbearable made it possible to take a step towards personal well-being. Planning an important event, a tattoo in honor of his sister's birthday, together with his father, a reminder that family ties and memories are an integral part of life. Next story. I'm not sure of the exact term food insecurity, but that's how he describes it to get the point across. Of course, in our 3 years together, this is news to me. Thus, I have developed a relationship with 2 teenagers, a younger daughter and an older son. My boyfriend and kids I only introduced to me 8 months ago. Recently, Ben started coming to our house and staying for long periods of time, sometimes for several days, going home once a week. I began to notice his strange eating habits, which seemed unusual to me. He would consume as much food as would normally be enough for 5, or instead of letting my kids decide for themselves how much to take, he would take on that role, putting less on them than they were used to and overloading his plate. It's worth noting that I pay for all the food. Last week, my daughter asked for more, and he stated that there might not be enough food for everyone. I interceded and pointed out that the kids could have more. Although I didn't directly voice my displeasure, I was seriously annoyed by his behavior at the table. There was so much food on his plate that there was easily enough for 3 people. If he had chosen a portion the size of the ones everyone else was taking, there would have been more than enough food for everyone. Nevertheless, I decided to discuss the situation with him that evening, emphasizing that my priority was the children and keeping them satiated. He, in turn, raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, apologized, and promised that it wouldn't happen again. He explained that he was acting out of an assumption of unfairness, thinking of those who might want more and implying that there might not be enough food for everyone, probably referring to himself. After his apology, I decided not to pay any more attention to it. Last night, he offered to go grocery shopping for me instead, since my kids were busy with their activities and I had a lot of other commitments. He didn't have much time either, but he insisted on helping. I sent him money, ample with supplies, along with an accurate shopping list. My list included plain bagels and classic cream cheese, but he came home with 3 different kinds of bagels and 3 kinds of cream cheese. I didn't bother to voice my displeasure. However, this morning, as my kids were making their own bagels, Ben started making remarks about which cream cheese they used, which upset me greatly. Although he didn't raise his voice, his facial expression said it all. My money paid for this purchase, but since he made the choice, he seemed to feel entitled to decide how my children should consume the food. As he left for work, I told him that this behavior was unacceptable, especially his food criticism, to which he apologized, attributing it to his insecurity about food. He assured me that he would try to hold back, but the memory of my daughter's reaction to his remarks never left me, and I realized I couldn't accept it. After my decision to end the relationship, he was shocked, claiming he couldn't believe I was refusing to work on the problem, calling me stupid for breaking up because of his so-called food insecurity. I don't think you are being unreasonable, and perhaps the term food insecurity doesn't accurately describe the situation. Rather, behavior that manifests itself in greed and a desire for control can have a negative impact. There is a risk that these attitudes can escalate into inappropriate nutritional advice, such as warnings to limit calories. This can lead to eating behavior problems in children, which is totally unacceptable. Not only does this behavior translate into attempts to restrict eating habits, but it can also affect the overall well-being of children by affecting their psychological well-being. This is extremely important to realize, and thank you for putting your children's interests first. After all, this behavior can extend its influence to other aspects of life as well, including time spent with your children as well as their financial well-being. If he already sees the children as competitors for your attention and resources now, it could turn into serious problems in the future. The approach to nutrition he promotes can set a dangerous precedent that can be difficult to change later. This is especially important given that the funds for food and other expenses are provided by you. The situation could be made worse if the resources were his. His actions are reminiscent of the cuckoo's nesting syndrome, where he tries to appropriate your space and resources by making them his own. Obviously, you are faced with the task of protecting your children from this influence. It is important to take steps to ensure their well-being and psychological safety. Now I want to tell a different story. At the age of 48, I, a woman, am preparing to marry my chosen one, a man of 39. This will be my second marriage. My first marriage ended after my then-husband found a new love and decided to stay with her, offering me a certain amount of money for the divorce. After accepting his offer, I traveled abroad where I met my current life partner. However, my children, 2 daughters aged 27 and 25, expressed their displeasure at not being invited to the wedding. They found out about my impending marriage through relatives. At the time of my divorce from my first husband, they were 22 and 20 years old, so they were already adults. My daughters insisted that I maintain a friendly relationship with my ex-husband and his new partner. The ex himself apparently considered me not only an ex-wife, but also a best friend, expecting me to bless his new relationship. He was shocked when I refused such communication. Despite his expectations, I could not accept his offer to maintain the friendship after all that had happened. My children, without taking my feelings and experiences into account, tried to arrange to meet the ex and his partner by inviting me to family lunches or dinners where they unexpectedly showed up. These actions led to the children throwing family events, inviting everyone but deceiving me about my ex-husband's presence. Their attempts to force us to socialize despite past hurts were perplexing and discouraging on my part, as I saw no point in such forced friendship after all that had happened. I made the choice not to keep in touch with them. I don't feel the need to be friends with my former spouse and his new partner. I recognize that I may have made a mistake in not including my children on my wedding guest list. Your behavior in the past has not caused me concern, but if I were in your shoes, I would be uneasy about my children's behavior at the wedding. I think the actions of your children and ex-spouse who continue to argue with you seem somewhat insensitive and selfish to me. They are adults, they are over 20 years old, and they should understand better. Often people say, my best friend, meaning my best helper in times of need. But in this case, their behavior seems unwarranted and negative to me. Your children should have been more understanding of the situation, given that they are getting older and starting to lead independent lives without seeking their father's approval. Their indifference to your feelings does not go unnoticed, and perhaps they are now facing the consequences of their behavior. Congratulations on your marriage.